Welcome to the first ever video episode of Skate of Thrones, the official TOT LA Kings podcast, bringing you inside the studio. I'm Kasey Kazliner, joined alongside Jackson Smith. We both cover the LA Kings for Talk of Troy. Jackson, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm happy that hockey season's upon us. About a week and a half, 2 weeks in. Storylines are heating up. Starting to see what teams are for real, what teams aren't, and it's been an exciting start to the year. I'm super excited to start this podcast this year, and I'm happy to be here. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. I mean, like you said, hockey's back. The Kings are back. It's been a slow start to the season. For context, if you weren't aware, Jackson and I both are credentialed media to the Kings, so we are in the press box. And Jackson just had his first game covering the Kings as media. How was that experience for you against the Hurricanes this past weekend?
Really cool experience. Awesome. Great getting to actually go to the game. It was a very entertaining game to watch. Crowd was into it. The players seemed energized, and just an awesome experience getting to witness everything, underneath the arena, in the locker room, up on the press level, free food, all
Can't
the
beat
good
it.
stuff. So yeah, great experience and a great game as well to be at and watch.
Yeah, well, let's get into some of those storylines you kind of alluded to. I mean, they are heating up, to say the least. The Kings have not had an ideal start to the year. They're 1-3-2, and it just seems like they're playing a lot slower. I think that's the biggest thing I've noticed from previous years is this team feels like they're a step behind, and they have played a lot of good teams so far. I mean, Carolina's a cup contender. They played Colorado opening night. They played Vegas. That was actually a game where the Kings were more successful and actually picked up a win, but at the end of the day, the Kings have not met the playoff level expectations of previous years, and we know that they've fallen short. But what has been your overall takeaway? I mean, my overall takeaway is they've been slow. What's yours been these past couple weeks?
Yeah, so when I look at how they've started this year, I like to compare it with the team last season because yes, the result was the same. They got eliminated in the first round, but it was a 105-point team, and I think they had a really good chance of going on a run in the Stanley playoffs if they didn't get knocked out by Edmonton. And they were also a historically good home team last season, and that has completely changed at the start of this year. I see a team that has not. I'm not saying they're not going to find it yet because it's only 6 games into the season, but it's a team that does not yet have their identity and doesn't know what
Yep.
their identity is. Last year, it was a team that would skate hard, check well along the wall, like suffocating defense in front of their goaltender. And this year, it hasn't felt like that. Yes, you alluded to they've been a step behind. I agree, it's looked like that. They haven't been nearly as tenacious in front of the net. They gave up 2 wide open goals in front of Tom Forsberg the other night against Carolina. And it just seems like there's a spark missing. And I
Yeah.
don't know what it is. I don't know if it's from behind the bench or up in the front office. But so far, it's like I have confidence that they will find their identity, but right now they don't.
I agree with the identity portion. I think a big part of it is they don't really have a forward that has truly kind of broken out from a speed and intensity standpoint like they might have had in previous years. I mean, you don't have it's not like Anze Kopitar is still able to be a youthful player. I mean, he's far from youthful. He's in his last season, and he's injured right now. But they have young forwards, don't get me wrong, but the guys that are younger who are maybe able to bring those sparks are not ready yet for a big role. They've tried to give enhanced roles to guys like Alex Turcotte, Alex Laferriere, both the Alexes, and they're both very solid players, but I don't think they're top 6 yet. I think they're guys that belong on the bottom 6 like last year who really they did well in those positions, especially Laferriere, who was one of the Kings' best goal scorers early in the season. And now they're trying to, it seems, fill the gaps with him when, I think trusting a young guy like that in his early 20s, mid 20s into a role like that is just not very smart. I think the same with Turcotte. So the point I'm trying to get at is you have players who are considered stars or superstars in this league, like Quentin Byfield, Adrian Kempe. But I feel like Byfield is a guy that, if you put too much on his plate, he's going to, fall under pressure as we've seen in previous years. And it's not like he's really done that so far this year. I think his mental game has lapsed with the penalties. Whereas I feel like with Kempe, he's always going to be very good. But I don't want to say he's only as good as his line. But I think when you have a center playing with him like a Deneau on the first line or someone else that just isn't quite up to that level of speed and intensity, he's not going to be the same player as any great winger wouldn't be. So I think really the issue starts at the top 6. and it all trickles down to the bottom.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. I think one of the things that LA needed to do in the offseason was improve their top six, and they went out and improved the bottom six. And while that's not a bad thing, that you can argue that the top six has only regressed because Anze Kopitar is not what he once was. I mean, he's still a solid player, and obviously he's injured right now, so that definitely hurts their forward depth. But I think based on the roster construction, they're still kind of um, banking on Kopitar being the player he was
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Yeah, and he's hurt
And
right
that's
now.
just not the case. I mean, this is his last season in the NHL. He's old. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a Capital situations from a couple seasons ago when they were transitioning from the Backstrom Ovechkin era into the younger guys. And I think the Kings have done a better job at balancing that with guys like Byfield and Laferriere, but they didn't add any supplemental pieces to the top six, and instead just are kind of relying on internal improvements to get over the hump. And again, not saying it can't happen. Quentin Byfield's looked really good. Kevin Fiala has looked fantastic. Andrei Kuzmenko has fit in like a
Been very good.
glove in LA. He's been great. But especially with the Kopitar injury, it leaves such a big hole in that top six. I don't know who's there to fill it. They've tried to give opportunities to Alex Turcotte
Philip Deneau.
and Philip Deneau. Joel Armia has even seen some time up there.
Wow.
But I mean, it's a team that's for a group just didn't change all that much for a group that struggled to score for most of last year.
Yeah, I think the Kopitar injury is still really baffling because, when he didn't play against Pittsburgh, he was considered a game time decision. And then it comes out that he's out week to week. I don't know if that's like a horrible misdiagnosis or what it was. I think that is really disappointing from a Kings standpoint. Maybe the players, thought they were going to get him back and didn't. And I mean, that line at the top can be very good. It has the ability to, when it's on, that line, especially in the playoffs last year, I know they lost, but that Kuzmenko, Kopitar, Kempe line can be very, very good, as any first line should be for a playoff team. But I think at the end of the day, when you're slotting in guys on the power play, who just really don't have that intensity. I mean, I really like Philip Deneau. I think he is a very sound player. I think he's a very good two-way guy. And I think you see that from Fiala in some instances as well. I just don't think he's quite up to that level yet. Well, he's a veteran, so I don't even know if his ceiling is really much higher. But I think, for what the Kings are trying to do, I think special teams has been, and we can talk about that now, especially, the movements Hiller has made on special teams. Because honestly, I maybe am in the minority here. I liked the 5-forward power play for what it was. At times, I think,
Especially in the playoffs.
especially in the
last
playoffs,
year.
because when you bring in a guy like Kuzmenko, to really, kind of just play the middle of the ice, win the puck back, and set up offensive sequences, it works. But when you go from such an electric unit to putting no on it for what it's worth, he's good. He's just, like I alluded to earlier, he's not an offensively minded guy in the same sense that like Adrian Kempe is. When you put him on there, when you put Drew Doughty on there, when, even Brant Clark has struggled a little bit on special teams. He's been, I think, a very good player. I mean, I think he's one of the Kings' better players. Special teams Clark has not been normal Brant Clark. He didn't look good against Pittsburgh on the power play or the PK. So what's your sort of take on special teams so far? I know that's been like a really big issue on both sides for the Kings.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team whose power play has struggled for quite a few years. And you alluded to it being great in the playoffs. It was against an Edmonton team whose power play is usually the one dominating
Yeah.
the Kings. So that was great to see for Kings fans. And a huge part of that was Kuzmenko. You mentioned how his role is he's the gritty guy. He's there to win the puck battles and work along the wall, enter the zone, and he's been very good in that role. But I think it's kind of a perfect encapsulation of missing that game-breaking talent.
Yeah.
On the power play, they don't have that go-to guy that they can rely on and feed the puck to in every power play for that one shot. Like, if you have 5 seconds left, you need last shot. Who are you going to give it to? They don't really have that guy.
They don't even get shots on the power play
That's-
sometimes. To be fair, they are 8th in the NHL in power play, which isn't bad, but it's early in the season. And I mean, before last game, it was toward the bottom. So it fluctuates this early in the year.
Well, and also the percentages are. I'm not trying to take anything away from their power play, which scored a goal against Carolina,
Yeah.
but it was partially a broken play. It deflected off a Canes defender, then Byfield. It was a great pass, but you could argue it was a little bit lucky over to a Kuzmenko who is left all alone. So if that puck doesn't get deflected and doesn't bounce right towards Byfield, that's probably not a power play goal in that opportunity. So um, definitely some work to be done. The penalty kill was much better
It's been bad though.
against the Canes. It has
Yeah.
been bad. I think that the reshuffling of the defensive lines has worked well for the Kings
Yeah.
since the start of the season when they were pairing Dumoulin and Cece together.
It's hard to get worse than that. Let's be completely
Yeah.
honest. I mean,
Maybe Edmondson.
I think the issue too, and this was an issue last year, especially with Fiala, and it came back a little bit against Carolina. The discipline on this team is non-existent. I mean, Quentin Byfield has been penalized a lot. The Kings are one of the most undisciplined, if not the most undisciplined team in the NHL. And when your PK is only 70%, which is bottom half, bottom 10 of the NHL, you're going to lose games. And I don't know if that's a coaching issue. I mean, I want to talk about Jim Hiller in a moment and just like what he's been able to do this year and maybe not able to do in some instances. But I don't know what sort of the mentality is there. I mean, I know the Kings have been a more defensively minded team in the past, and I think they're sort of shifting away from that this year, given the fact that Kuemper's hurt and the defense has not risen to the occasion ever since his injury and even before that. But when you're giving up, when you have like 25 penalties given up or something like that in 5 or 6 games, that's not going to be good for you. When you're giving up 5 power plays a game, like I don't care if you're good at penalty killing. That's still 10 minutes a game where you're not on offense. So I don't care. It's like in football. If you're punting every possession, you might not be giving up a touchdown every single time, but you don't have a chance to score. And the Kings have not played well. I mean, they gave up a shorthanded goal against Pittsburgh. The PK and the power play, special teams in general, have not fared well for them. And I think that's something that with this team, it's only going to get slower with, the pieces they have, unless they jumble something. And so that's why that rant sort of leads into my next question of like, Jim Hiller's made some changes so far. Obviously, the new GM, Ken Holland, made some changes over the offseason, better for worse, on some of them. What is your overall makeup of those changes so far? Obviously, you don't have Kopitar, so you have to be flexible. And the defensive pairings changed pretty instantly when we saw that Cody Ceci wasn't capable of playing with Brian Dumoulin, competently.
I think it's a little bit too early to make your final judgment. I did want to touch on the penalties. Jim Hiller mentioned after the Carolina game how the team just has to take less penalties.
Yeah.
They're playing from behind early in games. They're in the box consistently. I mean, they were starting to find momentum there in the third period the other night, and then Kevin Fiala it was the second period. Kevin Fiala takes a boneheaded holding penalty, which kills the momentum instantly. And then they take another penalty right after that, and the Canes go on a 5-on-3. Yeah, they didn't score on it.
Yeah.
But you're coming back from down 3-0, you cannot afford to take penalties, especially when you're trying to catch up to a guy and you grab onto his jersey. You just can't do that. Hiller mentioned it about the head coaching. I think Jim Hiller is a good coach. I think he's an experienced coach. I think I think he gets flamed a little bit too much by Kings fans. Keep in mind, last season was his first full-time coaching gig.
At least as a head coach,
as a head coach
Yeah.
in the NHL. You got to keep that in mind when judging his performance. And I think he's kind of been dealt an iffy hand to start this year. The Kopitar injury doesn't help.
No.
The Corey Perry, mentioned the Corey Perry injury.
Yeah.
That was the big bottom 6 addition that was going to help shore up their depth in special teams. He's been out since the start of the year. We don't know when he'll probably be back in a couple months at least. Kopitar's week to week. Darcy,
he has been skating, I will say.
Yeah, he
Corey,
has been,
but non-contact jersey.
Yeah.
So
we don't know what the timetable is for that return. Darcy Kuemper,
Kyle Burrows
is
too.
injured.
Like for depth, I know they're not wanting to run the 11-7 anymore, but like if you did, Kyle Burrows would probably be that 7th defenseman. So that doesn't help. And I want to just touch on your point too, because I do agree. I think he was dealt a tough hand. When you go from the team they had last year, and that team had its own issues, but still a very good team, to the team they have now that just feels like they're missing a lot of depth across the board, but not just depth, it's just overall talent. Like you can be a deep team. Like we've seen certain teams in the NHL, like a Dallas Stars team in the past that maybe doesn't have like that one, like Connor McDavid player, but they have 4 offensive lines of guys who will grind out and get you a win every given night, on top of a great goaltender. And it just feels like the Kings have 4 lines of guys who will put in effort, but not enough from their talent standpoint to be a game-breaking team. So when they play these teams early on, like Vegas, Colorado, Carolina, Winnipeg, Minnesota. Like these are all teams that have that depth, and it's showing, early in games when the Kings have to jumble those lines. I mean, I think for Jim Hiller, one thing I do appreciate about him is he's not afraid to jumble lines. I think that's something that's very risky to do. I think people think that's easier than it is. But I think it's almost an
100%.
an
Yeah.
admission. It's almost an admission that we don't have the depth to be confident about playing these four lines for 60 minutes, which I know all coaches usually switch up lines, but when you're switching up lines in the first period, which he sometimes does, or early on in games, maybe second period early on, it's almost an admission that, hey, we don't have the pieces to win this game. We have to change it up. And that's not a knock on Hiller at all. Like, I think, like, he is dealt a bad hand. But I think the problem with him is deployment, right? Like, putting certain guys in certain situations where they're not going to succeed, like putting Doughty on the power play or, maybe 5 years ago. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And also given that some of these players throughout their careers, it's taken them a couple of months to actually get into the groove. I mean, look at last year. Adrian Kempe was the only guy scoring for what seemed like 2 or 3 months until finally Fiala started to heat up in January. Byfield had a great second half of the year, but was
Yeah.
almost invisible
Fiala
throughout
had
the
a great
first
second
month.
half, but was pretty much invisible in his first half.
Exactly. So like you have guys who might take a while to figure out, which is why I commend Hiller for not being afraid to shake up those lines and try to give his team a spark. But they are missing something. But I think what's more impactful though than the forward core, because like they've been able to score goals this year. That hasn't been that big of an
Mhm.
issue. I think it's the most underrated change in a negative light was losing Jordan Spence.
Mhm.
Jordan Spence was a quick, good skater. He was arguably the best skating defenseman
Yeah.
on the Kings.
I agree.
Yeah,
I mean, Clark,
last
you
year.
put Clark up there.
Clark's up there, but
Yeah.
Clark had his defensive issues that you had to kind of shelter in terms of deployment and minutes. Spence didn't have that nearly as much, and I'm not saying Jordan Spence is more talented than Brent Clark. I think Brent Clark has a much higher ceiling.
Definitely offensively. Yeah.
100% offensively, but Spence was a reliable third pairing guy on a cheap cap hit who you could throw out there with pretty much any left-handed defenseman and who'd give you good minutes and who would check well and skate well and move the puck up the ice. The Kings are really missing that
They are.
this year because Cody Ceci just doesn't have the ability at his age
Yeah.
to do that. Drew Doughty, after his injury history last season and his age, he also doesn't have the ability to do that. Brent Clark's more of an offensive guy. He's not going to play that two-way game as much.
I mean, I agree. And I think talking about losing players, Vlad Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson were one of the best pairings in the NHL last year, hands down. They were so consistent every night. Two guys who would put their bodies on the line, especially Gavrikov. He's a huge guy. He leaves, and then you kind of screw over Mikey a little bit because Mikey has kind of been the first aid kit, if you will, putting him with whoever hasn't been playing well. Now he's a bottom pair with Cece as of last game.
The sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, he is. He's like the Band-Aid on the bullet hole,
Yeah.
so to speak. And I was a little bit disappointed to see Cody Ceci not play well last game because I felt like against Pittsburgh he played solid. Did he play 100%? No, but he hit a post. He was pushing pucks through traffic, trying to create deflections. He was not. I think for him, the standard is as long as he doesn't make an egregious turnover, they'll be fine, and he didn't. But then against Carolina, he completely falls off. And so that's another thing with the back end. It's consistency. You only have, I'm looking at the deep pairings from last game. The top pair is very okay. Like Dumoulin and Doughty, I think it gets the job done. But you move down, Edmondson and Clark, that's a defensive ability in its own right.
Yeah, well, that's one thing I was going to mention. Last year, and Joel Edmondson wasn't bad last year.
Mhm.
I think he actually fit in okay with the Kings in their system. But given analytics, you could make the argument that Clark was the bandage for Edmondson.
Yeah.
Now this year they have two guys that they have to bandage up. They have Cece, who Anderson is covering, and they also have Edmondson, who's still playing with Clark.
Yeah.
And you can argue that both Clark and Anderson carry their respective pairing. And for a team that's trying to go for a Stanley Cup, you just cannot have that kind of deficiency on your back end.
Yeah, and I know this isn't an off-season show, so we can't really talk about the CC signing.
Yeah.
But paying him that amount of money to replace a cheap cap hit in Jordan Spence, and losing Gavrikov. I know Gavrikov was worthy of his money, but you could have paid him that.
He didn't want to stay.
Yeah. Internally there were probably some issues that he didn't want to stick around for, and I think he could have gotten a bigger role elsewhere, which he probably inevitably will. But Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough, and I think, like, you look at the lines as well. One guy we haven't touched on a lot is Joel Armia. I think he's done a pretty solid job so far. Last game, he was the right wing on the second line. I know he's bounced around. How do you like him with Byfield Fiala? Because it looks like they won't. I mean, the fans. I mean, I'm on Twitter. People are in my replies saying they should move Byfield and Fiala away from each other because you want to have sort of the talent of both of them, the offensive talent on two lines. But the Kings say no. We like Byfield and Fiala were very good together second half, and it feels like they don't want to shy away from it. So I guess two questions for you: how do you like Armia on that line, and how do you feel about not moving Byfield and Fiala away from each other?
Yeah, I was just gonna say we got to start talking about the positives with this team. We can't keep
Oh
harping
boy.
on it. Yes, I think Joel Armia has been a very smart, savvy pickup actually by Ken Holland. I think he's a guy who can play all throughout the lineup. He can play on the penalty kill, great penalty killing forward. He can even play on the power play if you need him to. It might not be ideal for a cup contending team, but he can fill that spot. And yeah, I think he kind of does a little bit of what Andrei Kuzmenko does. He can play up the lineup, down the lineup, power play, special teams. He can do everything, and he's been great. Now he might not have the talent to necessarily match with Fiala and Byfield. The Kopitar injury doesn't help. I'm interested to see what Alex Turcotte might be able to do in those roles and
Yeah.
those higher spots in the lineup. But so far, so good from Yoel Armia.
And I mean, I sort of alluded to this too, but like my biggest question is why not put Byfield on the first line? I mean, I sort of brought it up with like they don't want to break apart Fiala and Byfield, but why not? Like, there's got to be some reason we don't know about other than we don't want to break up those two. But I think when you have one win in 6 games, like why not Byfield the keys? You have him locked up for I think 3 more years. He's your number 2 pick 5 years ago. He's clearly the franchise player. Why isn't he a first line? Like I'm asking you, but I think it's sort of a rhetorical question. You feel free to answer it, but like I just don't really understand. I mean, I know there's probably some analytical reason why. Maybe Ken Holland's opposed to it. Maybe maybe they're prioritizing having a better middle six than a top three. But I just don't really understand. Like when you're not struggling to score goals, but you're struggling to win games. Why not start a game with those three on the same line?
Well, after they went down early against Carolina, they did move. I don't know if it was more of a move Byfield up or move Kuemper down, but they did put Fiala, Byfield, and Kuemper together. That was one of their best lines on the ice.
Yeah.
But besides Fogle, Moore, and Deneau, who played a great game, by the way, that was probably their best game of the season, those three. They owned the ice whenever they were on it.
That's great.
But Fiala, Byfield, and Kuemper, they were put together in the second period. They played pretty well. Fiala got that goal to tie the game at 3. They combined for a power. Byfield had an assist on the power play goal, as did Kuemper. I'm interested to see if those lines stick together for the next game. That's kind of the whole thing you question is that going to stay the case? And especially when Kopitar comes back. But they do definitely need to give Byfield more of a look up there. I think he's capable of it. I think this is the year that they need him to take that next step into into that superstar echelon.
Yeah.
So far, he's shown that he can. Like you said, it's just a question of is Jim Hiller willing to do that?
I don't think he is. I mean, Jim Hiller, to me, again, we've talked about maybe he's received a little bit too much blame. I will say a lot of the blame comes at him being a conservative coach. He's a guy that, I think knows what he wants. He knows what the Kings are capable of, and I respect that. But I think inability to make change when it's the same story every year. It's Groundhog Day for this team every single year. And I'm not just referring to losing to the Oilers, but I'm talking about just the way they play, right? Like it's either they're really good at home or they're really good on the road. Like it's one extreme to the other. And I mean, it's early in the year, but they haven't won a game at home yet. They're 0-3. I will say a positive thing, because I know like there's a lot of negatives we could talk about, and we have touched on them, is that third line is very good.
Yes. It's reliable.
It's very reliable. And I think last year, like before they got Kuzmenko, it was easily their best line. I think when they got Kuzmenko, that first line was pretty tough to beat. But I think, Fogle is a guy who's always going to be net front. He's going to crash it. He's
20 goal scorer last year. Yeah, great pickup.
Nobody saw that coming. And I will say, like, for the hate they got this offseason, last offseason was pretty successful from a pickup
standpoint.
Yeah. Maybe not across the board. Like, I think there's still, like, some, issues they didn't address, of course. That's why they didn't make it out of the first round. But I think Deneau is very solid, two-way guy. You know, you put him on the ice, he's going to enforce the puck. He's going to win a puck battle for you, especially on the half wall, which is what they need to do. And then Trevor Moore, I mean, he has the speed and the wheels. I think we talked about lack of speed. I think Trevor Moore is a guy who brings the energy and the speed every night, coming down the flank on the left side or sometimes the right side, mostly the right side because he's the right wing. But I do think, and one thing I want to talk about as well, I know we're just sort of bouncing from topic to topic, but I think there's so many things to bring up here early in the season that are so
Mhm.
relevant. I feel like the Kings, and you talked about the power play goal they had that was a little bit on the luckier side. A goal's a goal, so like I give them credit for any goal they get. And you covered the Carolina game, so I wasn't there. I covered the Pittsburgh game this past week. One thing I've noticed a lot about the Kings is when they're scoring goals, it's not because of a good setup or sequence.
Hmm.
It's mostly because of being on the rush or
Yes. Yeah.
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 And what's your take on that?
I think that's a pretty fair assessment. The Fiala goal was on a rush. I mean, great play by Kempe. He kind of set up a screen, drove into the defender. That no penalty. That was great, smart play by Kempe. But the Moore goal and the Kuzmenko power, they're both kind of on broken plays. The Moore
Mhm.
goal, the puck bounced into the air. He shot it right as it landed on the ice. It went bar down. Okay, cool. And then the Kuzmenko goal, like I mentioned earlier, kind of deflected off a couple defenders. Um, I'd love to see them generate more offense in the zone. I think that is actually where Kopitar being out hurts because Kopitar's a good puck handler. He's a good passer. So that is something that the team needs to get better at. I will touch on, and I know we're kind of
No, go
bouncing
for it. Go for it.
like balls on a pool table right now, but I I think the Pittsburgh game we're looking at a lot differently if Darcy Kemper's in goal. I think
Yeah.
the Kemper injury is a much bigger deal than people are making it out to be. Those first two Penguins goals against Anton Forsberg. Now, yes, he bounced back in a great way against Carolina. He kept the team in the game in the third period
Yeah.
against the Canes. But a couple of those goals against the Penguins were soft. And even Jim Hiller mentioned that in the post game against Carolina. He said that Forsberg, he wasn't happy with his
Yeah.
game against Pittsburgh, and he wanted to bounce back, and he did. And he was proud of his goaltender for doing so. But this team, Darcy Kemper was a Vezina finalist
He's
last
very
year.
good.
He's very, very good. He's fantastic when he's healthy. They need him back ASAP.
Yeah, when he's healthy, he's one of the best in the league. And I
Mhm.
mean, I think a lot of people who don't watch the Kings every night, like us, they see Darcy Kemper and they're like, okay, the Kings have a great defense, like last year, which partially was true.
Yeah.
But he was, if you look at the advanced stats, he was top 5 in goals saved above expected. I how much you buy into that stat, like I know it's not like perfect, but it's still pretty reliable from just figuring that out. He was very good. That's the point we're trying to make here. Forsberg was not good against Pittsburgh. He's been very shaky this year, and I agree he did bounce back. And it kind of goes back to like who do you want to blame? Like the defense in front of him hasn't been great either. But I agree. I think the goaltending doesn't really get talked about enough, just because it's felt like these past few years the Kings haven't really had to worry about that.
Yeah.
You have Cam Talbot 2 years ago, who was an all-star, but he kind of teetered off in the second half of the season. Then you have the Jonathan Quick years where he was always pretty, he was a great goalie.
All right. And they brought in Jonas Corposalo for that one playoff run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, it's never felt like that was a huge emphasis of something they had to worry about. And now it feels like a liability of something. They brought in Phoenix Copley almost on like an emergency basis. I don't know how much he'll play, but what's your sort of, I mean, they have Eric Portillo in the pipeline. I mean, Carter George is young. I don't think he comes up this year at any point. I don't even know if he's eligible to. But what's your sort of take on I mean, you touched on Kemper, but even if they bring Kemper back, do you see that really changing a whole lot, just given the fact that like the defense has been so shaky?
I do, in a sense. Kemper doesn't give up those two goals against Pittsburgh that Forsberg did. But
Yeah.
the team overall does need to play better. They have yet to put together a full 60 minutes. Like they've played spurts of games really well. Like the Minnesota game, they came back at the end. The Pittsburgh game, the first 20 minutes were great and then teetered off. The Carolina game, they got absolutely dog walked in the first period and then started to kind of find their game second and third, but it still wasn't enough. They need to put together a full 60 minutes. In terms of goaltending, yes, Kemper coming back, in my opinion, will help quite a bit. I don't think Anton Forsberg is a long-term solution, nor was he brought in to be. He brought in
No.
to be just an upgrade at the backup position over Big Save Dave from last season. And in terms of the future goaltending position, I think Carter George is probably the best goaltender in the organization right now, yet he's way too young.
They have a lot of good goalies in the
They ha
system.
Portillo's
Slakinski.
not bad. I'd like to see him get more of a look. I'm kinda surprised they actually brought in Copley instead of bringing up Portillo, especially considering Kemper's age.
I think some of that has to do with, like, the Reign wanting to be a competitive
That's
team.
that's also
Yeah.
very, very true.
Which I think is funny in its own right because the Reign don't have a whole lot of depth either. It's a lot of veterans on that team, not a whole lot of youth. But I mean, just putting some numbers to your point about Forsberg, 3.89 goals against so far in 3 games played, and then save percentage, 88%, 880 if we're being technical. So it could be worse, it could be better. It's definitely a situation where you hope it's short term, but I feel like the thing we're getting at here, if we have sort of like an overarching thought, it's they didn't really prepare for the worst. You always have to in hockey, in a game that relies so much on depth, you have to figure that out ahead of time, and they just really didn't. So I agree. I want to take a look at the Pacific Division just as a
Mhm.
whole because it feels to me like this year in particular, it's like 1 and 2 feel like it's going to be Vegas, Edmonton probably again, but that number 3 spot is not like
We getting Kings Oilers again in the first
oh,
round?
I mean, it feels
Kings has some work to do.
death taxes and Kings Oilers, right? I mean, like San Jose, Calgary. I don't think Seattle. I mean, Seattle's in third right now. I don't think they're gonna. I mean, they just don't have the star power to me or the depth quite yet. Anaheim's been intriguing. I think they're not quite there yet, but I'm really liking some of these young guys. Beckett Seneca, Leo Carlson's been phenomenal. Their goaltending with Lucas Dostal has been great. Their back end could be better. It's a lot of small guys like Zellweger, Minchikov, Cutter Gauthier has been really good. Like they feel like they're a sleepy playoff team. Maybe I don't want to like have that be an official take yet because I think they're still on their way. Vancouver could have a bounce back year. I know they made some changes over the offseason. What do you think? I mean, I know it's really early. There's no point in even making like a playoff prediction right now, but where do you see the Kings sort of like falling relative to like the rest of the Pacific?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the season, I agree with you. I think Edmonton and Vegas are shoo-ins for the 1 and 2 spot. I don't see any reason not to believe that that's where they'll be.
Yep.
Going into the year, I didn't really know what kind of version of the Kings we'd get. So I said, okay, Kings will finish third. Right now, not so short. I still have a lot of confidence that the Kings will find their game. I think right now it's just a little bit of trying to find the consistency with the pairings and the line combinations. They will get there. I'm not concerned about that. And I still think they will make the playoffs.
If it's wild card, it might be wild card.
I think
Yeah.
it's more likely to be fourth, fifth place wild card finish. But I think Anaheim is, like you said, very sneaky good team.
Yeah.
I love what they've done down there. They locked up Mason McTavish and Jackson Lacombe.
Yeah, I didn't even mention him. And Drew Hellison's been really good
Yeah,
too.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think Jackson Lacombe's going to be a star
Yeah.
in the league for a long time. That decor is solid. They've got Rangers West out there with Chris Kreider. and
Kreider's
Jacob
been
Trouba.
very
Kreider's
good.
been great.
Yeah.
And Trouba, the analytics might not tell a great story, but he brings a physical edge.
Yeah.
So I actually like what that team is. I like how that team's built. I like the young guys, also mixed with the veteran presence. I think they're a very significant playoff contender in the
Yeah.
Pacific Division.
I mean, I worry a little bit about the size on the defensive end, but I think as long as you have Lucas Dostal in net
Mhm.
and you can supplement enough offense, which they've been able to do so far. I mean, they're 2-2-1, which isn't like otherworldly, but for Anaheim, a team that's been in one of the longest playoff droughts in the NHL, I think second behind just ahead of Buffalo, which is crazy
Poor
still.
Sabres fans.
Yeah, I mean, I know, this isn't a Ducks podcast, but I think it's interesting to look at the rest of the division because I think the Pacific every year, and I grew up, on the West Coast in California, so I've always been a huge Pacific Division guy. It's always a really intriguing division because, two new teams essentially, and then also just the fact that it feels like there's always one or two teams that like feels like a cup contender, but then the wild card spot potentially and then the 3 spot are always sort of up for grabs. I think you saw that last year. Like Calgary made a bit of a run, and they've been slow this year. I know they missed the playoffs last year, but they were close. They're going to need another goalie besides Dustin Wolf, and I think their defense isn't quite good enough yet. But last year, Vancouver was maybe last year's not a great example because Vancouver was disappointing, but the year before I think was really showed the depth of the Pacific, which is there. It just needs to be unlocked. So, yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think at the end of the day, if you're the Kings, you need to just go on a run at home. I mean, you were the best home team you've ever been last year, and you haven't won a game yet at home. The attendance has been down. I mean, you were at the game most recently this on Saturday. What was the attendance like at
I
Crypto?
mean, it was a decent atmosphere. It felt like a weekend game in October. They say 100% attendance, but there were some empty seats. But it wasn't nearly as bad as what it looked like on Thursday night when your tweet went viral
Yeah.
about empty seats at puck drop. I was actually going to mention, with it has been a very Groundhog Day like experience for the Kings. It's been third place in the division, bounced out in the first round. Last year, yeah, they got home ice, but it was the same result, bounced in the first round. And they still haven't made that jump yet to the top tier of the division, even though they went through a long rebuild. They had all these horrible seasons to get good draft picks. Do you think that's starting to show its effect on the fan base? And do you think that I'm not saying that the Kings have a bad fan base at all. I think that the fans here are passionate, they're bought in for their team, but do you think that there's a little bit of a reluctance to fully invest in the team's chances this year from the fans here in LA?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I think Kings fans are great, so I completely
Yeah.
agree with you. I don't think it's the fans' fault. I think the big thing is when you're competing in a market for, that has the Dodgers going to the World Series, 2 competent NFL teams,
Mhm.
LeBron James, and a brand new arena for the Clippers, even though no one really likes, I'm not gonna say that.
It's tough.
I'm not
It's
gonna say that
tough.
nobody
Yeah.
likes the Clippers, but the Clippers are not, super relevant, but they're getting a lot of fanfare. Whereas LA Kings, it just I kind of said it all there. I mean, you're in a very competitive market. There's college football, there's everything here. And you don't have a guy, I feel like, outside of the nostalgia players like Drew Doughty or Anze Kopitar. Not to say those guys aren't still good, but they're guys that won the Stanley Cup, over 10 years ago. You don't have a guy who like feels like the face of the franchise.
Yeah.
I know Quentin Byfield is on his way, but I can't confidently say right now like Quentin Byfield is the face of the Kings. I would feel dumb saying that.
I would say you could say Adrian Kempe, but he's way too nonchalant about everything. He
Well, and he's
scores. He
not
does.
locked down. Like they haven't signed him yet.
Yeah,
So
that's
there's
another
that
good
too.
point.
And like I feel like you would think the Kings would like the face of the Kings would be a defenseman. And I still think it is like Drew Doughty or Anze Kopitar, but they don't really have that number 2 defend behind Doughty, not in terms of talent, but more just like, being marketable. And I don't think marketability is everything in a sense, because I think like winning will get you free marketing.
Yes.
But the Kings haven't necessarily been winning, and I know ticket prices have gone up, and it's just like you're at a position with the organization where you have done a lot of great things these past 2 decades, but you've also not taken advantage of other things. I think, when you're a playoff team that constantly loses in the first round, you have to pivot, and they just haven't pivoted. And I know I talked about that at the top of the show. One thing I did want to say when we were talking about the division, this ties into the conversation we're having now. I've said this the past couple years, and I know it's sort of like I wouldn't say controversial, but sort of like back and forth take. I think the Kings would be in the best spot if they just made the wild card. Play a central team that, or play another Pacific team that isn't
Isn't
Edmonton.
the Oilers? Yeah.
Because in hockey, like once you get out of the first round, like anything can happen. Like the bad, not the bad teams, but the teams that don't really deserve to be there get whittled out in the first round every year. I mean, we saw that. Not to say like Montreal wasn't a good team last
New
year.
Jersey
New Jersey last year. I mean, not like again, like
Montreal.
Montreal's a solid team, but they're not there yet. There's St. Louis too. Like they played Winnipeg. Like I know that was a really good series, but like you get my point. I think, and I know like you play to win every night, and the Kings have done that, and especially last year where you finished second in the division. But like 2 years ago, they were close to making the wild card, and like probably would have had an easier matchup, I think, with Nashville, where I like the Kings odds they're better, and I'm not saying lose on purpose, but like I
They
think
they drew themselves into a matchup with the Oilers.
four,
Yeah, I know.
4 years now, like again, and I think it doesn't help your fandom. Like it doesn't help your fan base. I mean, when you lose to the same team over and over, it just feels like you're competent or you're compliant with losing at a certain point. And I don't know. I think it's a whole can of worms that we could talk about for hours.
I don't. Yeah, I don't want to harp too much on the past, but you mentioned not pivoting. I think there is still a little bit of buyer's remorse for the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. That was their effort to pivot
yeah.
and go to that next step, and it totally backfired. Now, were they able to salvage something out of it with the Dubois-Kemper trade? 100%. It's been a win-win for both teams, the Kings and Washington. And Kemper's been great. But I do think that they are a little hesitant to make that big splash. The silver lining and all this, yes, it's way too early to jump into all these conclusions. The Kings will most likely turn it around and start winning some games. They've had a tough schedule. Um, One other silver lining is they still have all their draft picks.
Yeah.
There is room to make a move if they want to go out
And
and
this
try
could
to
be a very
acquire
good
a
draft.
player. You've got guys in Buffalo who might be up for grabs if Tage Thompson wants out. I don't want to start just speculating random names, but
No,
that
I
would be
mean,
one heck of a target to go after. There are other
yeah.
guys all around the league. Pittsburgh's got some top 6 forwards they might be looking to offload. They have all their draft picks. They have the wherewithal to make the move. They just don't. They're in a weird position because they're not good enough to fully go all in yet.
It's the worst position to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you before we wrap up. I mean, it's early right now. I mean, the Kings could turn it around. Does it look like they will with who they have? I'm going to be completely honest. No. I mean, if I'm going to be frank with you, but stuff happens. I mean, like they brought in Kuzmenko last year, and that completely changed the offense, I think. Like, and
Yeah.
it still continues to be good. And I know he's not under contract for a whole lot of years, so they're going to want to start thinking about that. In addition to Kempe, if you talk about Riders Remorse, I mean, they have current guys who need to be signed long term. Even Byfield's not under contract for that much longer, all things considered. I think 3 more years after this one. My question to you, and I know it's early, and if you don't have a straight answer to this, I completely get it. But what's sort of the trade deadline approach? I know, like, you brought up the possibility of trading. I know it's early, but if you're the Kings, and let's say you stay at this same point pace where you're just kind of middle of the Pacific, what do you do at in February or January?
Yeah. So that kind of comes down to is it time to press the panic button? I don't think it is
Not yet.
yet. If the team is playing like this in February headed into the trade deadline, if they're in the same kind of situation where it doesn't look like they're going to, I mean, it's 6 games in. These are all overreactions about the start of the season. We're speculating about how the rest of the year is going to go. But if the team is still playing like this, I don't think you have to panic. You still have the core forwards there. Brant Clark and Mikey Anderson are the anchors of that back end for years to come. Offload the expiring deals. Maybe like Kuzmenko, try to find a taker for CC, Dumoulin, Edmondson. Like, no need to panic. Trim around the edges, and just build the depth and support group.
Yeah.
But again, I still think this team has the capability to be a good team. Last year they were fantastic. I thought they were the most underrated team in the league last year.
I'd agree there. Yeah.
And they just got a bad draw in the first round of the playoffs and are a chipped puck out of the zone away from a 3-1 series lead against the Oilers, headed back to LA for a series clinching game 5.
Yeah.
So this team is close. They have the pieces. They haven't come together yet this year. I still have confidence they will, but the Kings do have to be ready for an alternative if they don't.
Yeah, and you have to start thinking about, if you're the Kings, the prospects as well. I mean, you have some really solid ones. You drafted Henry this year in the first round. You got Liam Greentree, who looks very solid. Carter George. Like, you have some really good Jack Hughes, not the Devils Jack Hughes, but the other Jack Hughes. Like, you have some really good names in the pipeline, but nobody who's really, like, separated yet. And so you maybe wonder, like, if you're in all-in mode in this year, and I bring these guys up because of the trade deadline, you maybe think about, like, how much of the future do you sacrifice? Because one thing, and this could be a whole other conversation, so I won't, like, maybe that's something for next episode next week. But, I think Quinton Byfield got a really unfortunate situation he was put in because he was drafted where he couldn't have, he's not like Macklin Celebrini or Connor Bedard, where he could take the keys right away.
Yeah.
But he was too good to be, like, traded to another team, for another big name, or like he was too good to fall by the wayside and stay in the for the Ontario Reign or the juniors for too long. But he was certainly not bad enough. You know what I mean? Like, it was a weird position to be in because he was never going to be that number one guy or the face of the franchise like some of those other names I mentioned that are top 3 picks. But I think he's an interesting name to just remember. If he does have a slow start to the year, what's sort of the move with him on a line standpoint? I really do think he's a first line player, but I think the organization has a very long-term plan with him. And I trust him, I guess, but I think at the same time, like, I wouldn't imagine that Byfield's the happiest guy right now. I think he's in a tough position. It's not his fault. It's not really the Kings' fault either. You have the number 2 pick. You're going to take the best guy available, and that was Quinton Byfield. But like I said, he was too good not to play, but he was not good enough to be like the Anze Kopitar of the future yet. and now he's been drafted for 5 years, and he hasn't truly broken out. Like, he's broken
He's
out.
shown those flashes
He's
for
shown
sure.
flashes, but he hasn't been like a Tim Stutzla, Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini. We've seen these picks these past 5 years that have just become the face of the franchise. Not just that, but like really good hockey players.
Well, I think you can make the argument that the second half of last year he actually was that guy.
Yeah,
I thought there was that stretch of games where he scored, what was it, 6 games in a row
yeah,
around March time, especially when they played the Caps. He had a big goal,
yeah.
but and then he played great in the playoffs. I think he's close. I understand the long-term plan the Kings have, but if the season does start to slip away, I say just let him take the reins and give it a trial run on that top line and the top power play unit and see how he rides it out. But
I think the
um,
mental aspect of his game still needs some work. I mean,
Kopitar being injured does not help.
yeah, like I mean, you talked about the chip puck, like that. I know it's last year, but those are types of plays that like still sometimes happen that he makes, and he's a very good passer.
Mhm.
His passing's great. The discipline, though, for Quentin Byfield has not been good. We've already talked about that, so no need to bring it up again. But that's just gonna about wrap it up. Do you have any sort of final thoughts? I know the Kings, go on the road, where
Long road trip.
they've actually fared better than home. Technically, they don't have a regulation or OT win yet, though. They only have a shootout win.
Yep.
Like, what are you sort of looking at for next week?
So they need they need to start rattling off some wins. I think one good thing is I don't want to discount any team's abilities, but it does look like they have some easier games on the schedule. They've got San Jose, Chicago, St. Louis is a solid team, but they're not anywhere near the top tier of the league.
Dallas will be tough, though.
Dallas will be tough. I mean, Carolina is still unbeaten. Like, keep that in mind. And they took them to overtime. They actually played pretty well the second and third periods. I think for them going into this 5-game road trip, the goal should be to get 3 wins and then back home.
That would be huge.
That would be
'Cause
huge.
then you're closer to getting Kopitar back.
Yeah.
We don't really know like a whole lot of update. I'm sure next morning's game we might get a next update on him. But yeah, I agree. I think, you gotta finish games. I think that's the biggest thing now is they haven't been able to finish games. Saw that against Pittsburgh, Carolina. I mean, really every
They've
time.
shown flashes of being a good team. They just need to put together the full 60 minutes.
Yep. And I think that's a good place to end. Well, we thank you so much for tuning in. We'll have coverage from pretty much every home game and away games that we're able to, either cover or make it out to. So we really appreciate you guys for tuning in. And I'm Kasey Kazliner, Jackson Smith. Episode 1 of the video portion of the Skate of Thrones. We'll still have the non-video for various home games. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.